So we're discussing the kind of the charter or the ownership of the fulfillment group. And there's an idea to say, hey, the fulfillment group should be responsible for kind of the core billing infrastructure. And then the growth teams, which we now have, can then be responsible for other parts of everything in that, like the signups and the workflows there. The assumption underlying that is that we can decouple those things into separate applications, or that we can have like separate applications or microservices, or that there's an API in between. I disagree with that assumption. I do not think that that is the case. I think we have kind of one customer portal. I think that the most efficient way to do that is one code base. So the kind of the splitting up in different applications is not ideal from kind of a velocity perspective. Like we'll just be less efficient as a company. What needs to be very clear is that fulfillment and the portal should be run like the rest of GitLab, where everyone can contribute. So although they own the application and they might be the maintainers on that, and they have to kind of merge requests that come in, they are not, and the PM of the fulfillment team prioritizes the time of that team. When there's contributions coming in that they didn't ask for, that is very important to quickly kind of turn those around, get them merged, get people feedback. Just like we do that for GitLab. Every month we have 200 improvements in GitLab that we didn't schedule. So, and that's been a lesson for us, for the PMs, that PMs schedule the time of the engineering team. They do not determine the direction of the product apart from that. Like if there's other people contributing to that and it wasn't on your roadmap, then that doesn't mean it shouldn't happen. And I think that's a bit the trap that we've fallen into, where we think that the fulfillment team PM should coordinate all of that, and that the fulfillment engineering team should make all of that. That's not the case. Other teams can do that. So that would be my proposal. Keep the fulfillment team as the code owners of the portal application and the other applications, but make sure that all the other teams know that they can contribute. And then it's okay for the PM, for the fulfillment team, to focus on things that only they can do, billing flows, things like that, and that the growth team contribute to things that are in their goals, and that we maybe even change the goal of the fulfillment team to have as an explicit thing they focus on, is like making sure that other people can effectively contribute and change the application. Make that a stated goal. Now, this is besides any like super major things we have to do. Like if we need a rewrite or something like that, that's a different situation. But the solution of needing multiple people to contribute to the same thing should not be to split it up into separate apps. What you get then is the situation you get with plugins, because this is kind of a plugin thing where, oh, just make the core application, we'll make plugins on top of that. And the disadvantages of that are described on our direction page, but it's, for example, very hard to maintain, and there's inefficiency, and a lot of things arise. Anybody wants to react to that?
So I have a question. You said we need to make sure that the other teams need to be told that they can contribute to, let's say, the customer portal, so fulfillment doesn't have to do it all. It's also true to say that like those teams can't just decide what they do, because it's the PM scheduling them. So what PM that's responsible for another area is going to direct the team that they coordinate with to go work on fulfillment?
So I understand that the growth teams have a separate PM, and that PM, so there'll be 5 different PMs, the PM of the fulfillment team and 1 PM each for the growth teams. Does that answer your question? I have a feeling it doesn't.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, like, why isn't that happening today?
I think why it's not happening today, but this is an assumption, is because people feel like, oh, I need a change in the fulfillment app. It's owned by that team. I'll go ask them to do that for me. And now the fulfillment team is way too much on their plate. And they're all waiting for the fulfillment team to help them.
So how would we state, in this world, what would we say is the fulfillment team's mandate?
The fulfillment team does, the engineering team does whatever the PM says, and the PM right now, should do whatever adds the most value to GitLab, but the PM should realize that there's these growth teams that will focus on some of these things, so probably add different tasks. And one of the mandates, or one of the things the fulfillment team should do, is make it easy for other people to contribute. Like make sure there's good documentation, make sure that the CI/CD and the feature flags and stuff like that are working appropriately, and make sure you have you get feedback back to teams quickly, and you're able to process merge requests that come in from other teams quickly.
It feels like we've circled back around to the PMs for the various groups need to figure out how to coordinate with one another.
They don't. They don't. Insofar as the only person who should coordinate, who should be aware of the new situation is the PM of the fulfillment team, because we now have these growth teams that do part of the things that they've been doing before. You should probably take stock of what the growth teams are doing and leave that to the growth teams and focus on all the other stuff, because everyone agrees there's enough to do.
Okay, so then we should do like a near-term experiment then, and say, okay, for some period of time, the end of which we're comfortable judging success or failure, the fulfillment team is going to make it easier for other people, other teams to contribute to their code. The expansion, conversion, acquisition PMs are going to be told that they can and should have their teams contributing to that area of the code base. And then we see if we get a different behavior at the end of 1 month, 2 months, a quarter, what's reasonable to see if this recipe is working.
I'm not sure. For sure, I don't want to stop anything that's in flight. And I'm not sure even the fulfillment team should focus on making it easy to contribute. Maybe it's already easy to contribute and the other teams just didn't know that it was allowed. So it really depends. I cannot tell. I don't have the information.
The growth team has contributed to other parts of the code base, so I don't think it's necessarily, though the growth team is now 4 different teams. So there may be some variance within those teams. I have to take a little bit more to make sure I understand what's happening in this particular situation, which may be a new one. I know at least in one case we contributed, and that team wasn't engaged for proper review. It was reviewed by a separate maintainer. It was merged, and there was a problem with it, which had to basically get addressed. So that's a good example where the growth team was actually being assertive and helping contribute, but they weren't engaging in collaboration, where we basically added working across stages where they should really collaborate on that. So if we're not seeing the right level of collaboration with fulfillment teams, then that sounds like an issue we should probably be addressing.
Yeah, you should make it clear to the fulfillment team, like, hey, it's your job to kind of review code of other teams. It's a core part of your job.
Or if your documentation isn't up to snuff, fix the documentation, but also help them in the short term to make sure that they can contribute.
For sure. So maybe that's all we have to tell the fulfillment team.
And it also sounds like if your hypothesis is right, Sid, then fulfillment has a backlog that's over large right now, and it would be worth going over it and pulling out issues from the fulfillment backlog and having them land on these other teams. And if we don't find anything, then we know that, like, okay, there's something else going on.
Yeah, I would just say to the growth teams, hey, growth teams, have a look at the fulfillment backlog and kind of claim ownership of anything you think you want to be doing. And just so not push, but have them pull it in.
That seemed like the core of Scott's request to me. So if you look at 24A, 1, 2, 3, and 4, like that's the problem you're trying to solve, is those things. Yeah. And it sounds like everybody's okay with saying, yeah, the growth team owns these experiences in this way. And this is actually how we could measure whether or not this is successful. It's real easy for us to say, okay, do we now have a new sign-up flow? Do we now have a new trial flow?
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
That makes sense to me. Thank you all.
Cool, thanks.
So is that something we want to